We're all told we should replace our running shoes regularly, every 500 to 800 kilometers. But if you're running regularly, that's a lot of shoes. So what should you do with the old ones? According to the US Department of Interior, Americans throw away about 300 million pairs of shoes every year. And interestingly enough, in the UK, the number is also about 300 million pairs that end up in the landfill every year. In fact, these numbers are probably both grossly underestimated because an estimated 18 billion pairs of shoes are sold around the world every year, and that's about 2 pairs of shoes for every person on the planet. Now, not all of those are running shoes, but running shoes make up a fair few of them. We're told to retire our running shoes every 500 to 800 kilometers or 300 to 500 miles to help prevent injury and improve running performance. And if you're running around 20 miles or 30 kilometers a week, that's 2 to 4 pairs of running shoes per year. Most of these running shoes end up in landfills, and some parts of running shoes can take up to 1,000 years to biodegrade. We think. I mean, no one was throwing away Nike Alpha Flies in the 11th century, but it's an estimation. Now, no one wants their shoes to end up in a landfill, but there's only so long you can use that old pair of shoes for working in the garden, and there's only so many shoes that you can keep in a box in the corner of your garage. Sooner or later, you're going to have to get rid of them, and this is where the problem comes in. Essentially, there are 3 routes for your old running shoes. They can be reused by someone who still finds value in them or for another purpose. They can be recycled into their component parts and used to make something else, or they can be discarded or incinerated. The first option, handing them to someone else who will still find value in them, is most people's first choice. I mean, they were pretty pricey shoes when you bought them, and they're still pretty good for their purpose, which is as shoes. They're just not going to fit their purpose for your running shoes to prevent your injury and the miles you want to do. Surely someone can find some use for them, right? You're probably right. Someone probably would love your old carbon-plated super shoes. But the problem is that someone is probably in India or Africa or some other far-flung destination, and getting your used shoes to that person and finding the person with the right foot size is incredibly infeasible. It also passes the problem of shoe and clothing waste onto someone else, and often that country is not as well equipped to deal with the shoes and clothes that don't find a home and do end up as waste. For example, every week Kantamanto Market in Ghana, at West Africa's second largest second-hand clothing market, receives about 15 million items of clothing, but 40% of those items are discarded due to poor quality. And as a result, Ghana's capital, Accra, is overflowing with clothing waste. And most of this is burned in piles on the street corners or in huge bonfires out in the countryside, or it's sent to poorly constructed landfills. That is not to say that your first instinct to hand those shoes over is wrong. It just needs to be done in the right way. The shoes need to be handed over to an organization that is able to get the shoes that are reusable to the people who are going to be able to reuse them, and to deal with the waste of the shoes that are no longer reusable, and importantly, to be able to tell the difference. Sportshoes.com have partnered with Jog On, and Runners Need have partnered with SOX, and there are many more organizations and schemes like this. Essentially what they do is they collect the used running shoes, they sort them into usable and unusable ones, and then make sure that the usable ones get to the right people, and they recycle the unusable ones. So is recycling shoes an option? It is, but it's a complex process. Running shoes are made up of many different materials and many different types of materials, and they are literally designed to not fall apart. I mean, no one wants the soles of their shoes falling off on the latter stages of a marathon. And so recycling shoes is a complicated and time-consuming process, but it can be done. Generally, shoes can actually be recycled. They just generally can't be recycled back into running shoes. The SOX specializes in this, as does TerraCycle, and there's many more organizations. So if you're interested, hop onto Google, and I'm sure you'll find a scheme near you that you can make use of to actually recycle your shoes and make use of them. The recycling of shoes involves a process of delamination, air separators and magnets, which break the shoes down into their raw components: leather, rubber, foam, metals and fluff. And these are then used to create all kinds of things like table tennis paddles, athletics tracks, insulation, astroturf, bonded leather, garden furniture, and much, much more. All this recycling sounds great, and it is. But unfortunately, only a very small percentage of shoes actually make it into this kind of scheme. And even if all the shoes did, there aren't enough facilities to handle the volume. And so the best thing that you as a runner can do, beyond of course making sure that your old shoes are the shoes that make it into those schemes, is to reduce the number of shoes you go through. Now, we're not saying you should go out and run 100 kilometers a week in old, worn out shoes. That is definitely not a good idea. But you can squeeze all of the life out of your shoes. Too often, shoes are discarded just because they don't feel so great anymore, or because you got a new pair that is a bit more shiny and looks greater. You need to use your shoes until the end of life. And that means slowly phasing them out. Stop using them for your longer runs or stop using them for your faster runs, but still use them for those shorter, easy runs. Not only will you squeeze all the life you can out of your shoes, you'll also build up your own resilience by running on shoes that are a little bit less forgiving for those shorter runs. And of course, you can extend the life of your shoes as much as possible by looking after them. Keep them clean, but don't machine wash them. Untie the laces every time you remove them. Store them somewhere cool and dry and away from the elements, and only use them for their intended purpose, that is running. No more football in your running shoes. Of course, the onus isn't all on us, the consumer, to reduce shoe waste. Big companies are making billions of dollars from those 18 billion shoes that are sold annually around the world. And the onus is also on them to reduce shoe waste. And some of the companies have taken this to heart, such as On Running. They've seen the difficulty in recycling a typical shoe and so have made one that is 100% recyclable. It's not this one. And this is going to sound like a bit of a plug for On. It isn't, but it's more of a high five to On for their efforts. They've created the Cloud Neo, which is a 100% recyclable shoe. All of the foams and materials used in the shoe are fully recyclable, and they also haven't put any dyes in it so that it can be fully recycled. It's still a performance running shoe. It's got Pebax foam in it, the same foam that was in the shoes that won the Ironman World Championships, but it just doesn't have the waste afterwards. And On have taken this a step further, if you'll excuse the pun, because you don't buy the Cloud Neo, you rent it. And the old shoe is recycled when you send it back. So you get the shoe, you use it for 3 months or more until it's worn out, then you send it back and they send you a brand new pair of shoes. It's a subscription service for shoes. So you will always have shoes that are 3 months or less old, and On will always get the shoes back to recycle them. It's out of the box thinking, and it solves a lot of the waste problems around running shoes. And there are other big brands getting on board with this kind of philosophy too. Salomon have released their Index 02, the successor to their Index 01, a shoe that can be easily dismantled for recycling purposes. And Brooks have released their Ghost 14, a carbon neutral shoe that claims to have zero carbon footprint. So the big brands are getting on board, and recently Ortholite released their Ortholite Circle. Ortholite make the foam for many brands, almost all of the brands. They make some of the foam that's used in the shoes, and they've released Ortholite Circle, a more recyclable foam to be used in the shoes of all of these brands. So the big businesses are getting on board. Even if you're not quite there yet and you're not ready to subscribe to a subscription for running shoes, we hope today we've given you some answers on what you can do with your shoes and made you think a little bit about your running shoe waste, rather than just keeping them in a cardboard box in your garage until they mold away and end up in a landfill. If you've enjoyed this video or you have any suggestions, leave your comments down below. We'd love to hear from you. We will also leave some links to some of those schemes that we have mentioned in the description down below, so you can click those links and read some more. If you enjoyed our video, hit that thumbs up button to support the channel, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more of GTN's videos. Thanks for watching, and happy running.